up, you guys? I'm Amina. Welcome to my channel, Amina Reads, and today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in September. In September, I read 11 books, so yeah, we got lots to talk about, mostly lots of romance, and yeah, before we get into that, I want to thank today's sponsor, Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a super popular online subscription service. Each month, they give you a carefully curated selection of 5 books to pick from. This subscription box is risk-free and you can skip any month at any time for no charge. But this month, the picks are so exciting. This month's selections are Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam, debut thriller novel by an author of color. The next title that they have is The Girl in the Mirror by Rose Carlyle, which is a thriller about 2 twins, and I'm really excited about this. The next one is Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman, which is a prequel to Practical Magic. Then we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, one of my most anticipated releases of the fall. And the final book of this month is Ties That Tether by Jane Garu. And this book is a adult contemporary romance about a Nigerian protagonist. Use the code BOOKUP to get your first box for $9.99. So, the first book that I read in September was Jade War by Fonda Lee. This is the sequel to Jade City. Jade City is a fantasy series about this family called the Calls, and they are kind of a mafia family. They're part of the Call clan, and in this world, Greenbones control the city. Greenbones are people who have the ability to wield jade. In this world of K-Con, there is a natural resource called bioenergetic jade, and these people, they wear the jade. It gives them supernatural abilities, kind of, sorta, and it's basically, you know, gang war between the Call family and the Mountain Clan. So we see the Calls and the Mountain Clan kind of battling it out. In the first book, it's kind of more of a street battle, and then the second book, Jade War, we're seeing more of a political battle, more of a battle in the press, in the public eye, and to see how the rest of the country perceive this Greenbone battle. And we also really expand the world to kind of flesh out the world a little bit more. And as a sequel, I really think that it did a lot of really amazing things. It introduced us to some new character perspectives of some of the side characters, which I did really appreciate, and I really liked how that enhanced the story. And I think that one of the main things about Jade City that I love is kind of like the geopolitics and the implications of having these two like clans, how they affect the politics of the country that they live in, because they basically control the politics, they control the governmental body, they control the flow of economics in their country. And so it's just interesting to see, like, how is a country like this perceived by other people, and how can a country like this actually operate and run. So it was interesting to see how all of that works out, and I think that Fonda Lee just did a really amazing job continuing to flesh out this world and make it bigger and brighter and more high stakes. I really did appreciate that, and she brought a lot of like nuance, and she also continues to ground the series, even though it is kind of, you know, magical and there's like this criminal underbelly thing going on. She really does make it feel like a grounded series full of characters that you equally root for, and you also feel like, wow, these are kind of really bad people. And I don't know, I just think that she does this really well. However, instead of 5 stars, I gave this one 4 stars. I just didn't love it as much as Jade City, and I didn't connect to it quite as much as Jade City. It just felt like, it definitely felt like a middle book. It felt like a middle book that was expanding and creating new ground for the series to explore in the conclusion, but it didn't fully feel like, I wasn't as invested in the plot, and it didn't feel as like action-packed and like frantically turning the pages. It didn't have like that effect on me, but it was still really good, a still really solid entry in this series, and I'm over the moon excited about reading the 3rd book. I desperately want to know how this series is going to end. So yeah, it was a really good installment. It wasn't my favorite necessarily, but it was still really, really amazing. I would highly recommend reading the Greenbone Saga if you haven't already. Then I started in on all of the romance that I read. That was the only fantasy I read this month. So after that, I made my pegging and polyamory video. If you haven't seen that, maybe you could check it out, but it's just a vlog where I read some romances that either have pegging or polyamory or both. So the first book that I ended up reading was American Sweethearts by Adriana Herrera. So this book is about these 2 characters, Juan Pablo and Priscilla, and Juan Pablo and Priscilla have been in this really long-term friendship and romantic relationship for a really long time, and they have this on-again, off-again relationship that's been going on for about 15 years at this point, and it's basically them kind of making this final attempt at making their relationship work. And Juan Pablo, has gone through this whole journey of like emotional growth, and he's really gotten some therapy, and he's trying to be a much more emotionally mature person so that he could be the kind of man that Priscilla really, you know, wants and needs in her life. And he's trying to kind of woo her, win her back one final time so they could really be together. Personally, really love this book. I thought that it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it so much. I think that Adriana Herrera's writing is just really stunning. Like, it made me immediately immersed in the scenario with the characters. I felt like she writes the character dynamics so well between Juan Pablo and Priscilla, and also between them and like their friends and their family. I just felt really immediately drawn into the story and into these character relationships, and she just immediately convinced me of like the history that these people had, the chemistry that they had, and I believed every single bit of it. I thought it was so good, and I was constantly rooting for them the entire book, so I really loved it immensely. I also thought that it was really hot, and it was written very well in all ways. Basically, it was also really funny and fun. It was just really nice. I definitely would recommend the audiobook. The only reason that I didn't give it 5 stars is, and maybe that might be me nitpicking it too much, but the only reason I didn't give it 5 stars is that I felt like Priscilla, she didn't experience as much emotional growth, or at least I didn't feel as much emotional growth from her as I felt from Juan Pablo. And since the book is kind of about how they both need to go on this journey of emotional growth so that they can come together and be in a more healthy place relationship wise, I felt like Priscilla, she still had like a ways to go, and I just feel like there wasn't enough emphasis on Priscilla, you know, getting her emotional life together. And I felt like Juan Pablo was like, he almost presented as being like really perfect, and I felt like the story didn't convince me on what he did previously that was so bad that he needed to be, you know, the one constantly groveling towards her to get her to take him back and stuff. It just like, it seemed like equally they had a bad relationship because they both were in bad emotional spaces, and so I wanted to see both of them having like equal amounts of, you know, emotional growth. And I just feel like Juan Pablo's emotional journey was a little bit more convincing to me, but that's just me. So after that, I read Forever Theirs by Katie Robert, and this is the 2nd book in her Thelonian Dynasty series. The Thelonian Dynasty is about these characters, Meg, Theo, and Galen, and this is a polyamorous relationship series, and it's basically about this Prince Theo. He has since been banished, is that the word? Been banished from his country by his corrupt uncle, and he's trying to get his crown back and trying to figure out a way to kind of reestablish the, I don't know, the natural hierarchy or whatever of his monarchy at home in his country of Thelonia. And while he's doing that, he ends up being in New York, and he meets this girl named Meg, and him and his bodyguard Galen, his bodyguard slash boyfriend Galen, they meet this girl Meg, and they end up hooking up with her at a club. That's what happens in the 1st book, Theirs for the Night. In this 2nd book, they are trying to like deal more so with like the emotional fallout of that hookup and how they really like each other and everything like that. I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't like this that much. I gave it like 3 stars. That might be generous. I just didn't like it. Like, I didn't care about the characters. I felt like they were kind of annoying. I felt like it was just a bit boring and like contrived and just annoying to me. The way that the characters would act and interact with each other, I was not a fan at all. The sexy scenes were fire. Fire. That's all I can say about that. But I feel like as a relationship, I didn't buy it at all. I didn't feel why they would be in love or why they like each other. They really only had that single night that they had met before, like months prior, and then in this book they're kind of on the run for some reasons, and it just felt like there's absolutely no reason for them to all like be in love and all this kind of stuff. So it didn't sell me as a love story in almost any way, but it was hot, so there's that. Also, Meg, she was refusing to take their money, and they were rich. Like, they wanted to help her out and pay her tuition, and she didn't want her tuition paid. It just will never make sense to me, and I will continue to complain about it every single time I talk about this book, because why, sis? Like, doesn't make sense. I read Pink Slip by Katrina Jackson, and this was another book that I felt a little bit about. You all know that I really love Katrina Jackson, and I really did think that this book was fun. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It's probably closer to a 3.5. This book is kind of pitched as What if James Bond had a wife and him and his wife were in love with their secretary? So we have these two spies, Monica and Lane, and they're married, a little bit of a Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibe. And in the beginning of the book, they hire this secretary named Kira. So Kira has a mutual crush on both of her bosses, and they really like her as well. So they just have the kind of like this playful sexual banter in the office, and they end up needing to take her on a mission with them. And this book follows that mission, and also them, like, you know, falling in love and getting together and all that stuff. I'm going to be honest, I don't really believe it. I don't really buy it as a romance. For me, it didn't do a whole lot. I wasn't like invested in the idea of them because I felt like this story didn't give me any kind of sense of emotional intimacy, I guess, between the characters, because the characters were like so incredibly horny. Like, I have never read a book about hornier characters than when I was reading this book. Like, if you're into, like, you know, sexy books, you would definitely like this. And I do think that like the whole spy aspect was really fun, but I wasn't 100% sold on like the emotional chemistry between the characters. I didn't really see them as being in love, but they were really hot together. So after that, I ended up reading Private Eye, also by Katrina Jackson. This is in the same The Spies Who Loved Me series, and this is about a different person named Maya and Kenny. And Maya is a cam girl, and Kenny is one of her clients, but he also happens to be a spy. And he basically ended up stumbling upon like her cam show when he was doing some research into Kira in the first book. He was doing some research into Kira. Maya happens to be Kira's roommate, and he kind of stumbled upon her from there, and he ends up becoming like a patron of her, you know, cam girling, and they become close. They have a really close like client and performer relationship. And basically once Maya finds out that he is a spy and all that, it's like, you know, some drama ensues, and he has to kind of make it up to her and grovel and apologize for kind of that like imbalance of power, because he knew more information about her than he let on, and it was a bit weird. But I think that Katrina navigated that aspect pretty well, because it was a little bit weird. It was a little bit creepy at first. But Maya and Kenny, they were amazing. Legends, chef's kiss. Mwah. They were just, ooh, I loved them so much. Maya and Kenny, they were so funny together. They were so sweet. Kenny is just like this adorable, nerdy spy, obsessed with him. I loved him so much. Maya, she was a bad bitch, a legend, an icon. We love her. We stan. It was just really, really good. And I feel like it had all of the elements of Pink Slip, but it gave me like that sense of emotional intimacy that I really wanted. And I think it's because this book was longer. This book was maybe like 300 pages, and Pink Slip was only like 190. So I feel like there was just more time and space for like emotional development, and I really loved and appreciated that so much in Private Eye. So Private Eye, 5 stars. After that, I read Jane Eyre for a class. Ooh, ow. Did you guys hear my bones cracking?
Child. Anyway, so
what is Jane Eyre about? Jane Eyre is about this girl named Jane Eyre. She is an orphan. Basically about Jane kind of being mistreated throughout her life by a variety of people, by some family members, by this school that she attends where they kind of abuse the kids. And it's basically Jane's life kind of experiencing all these things, being a woman in England at this time and having like no family and no wealth to her name and what all that's like. But it's also a little bit of a romance between her and this man named Mr. Rochester as she becomes the governess for his child. And yeah, that's kind of what Jane Eyre is about. If I were to dumb it down to the bare minimum, I have been talking about it in my classes for weeks, and it's just like, I don't know how to describe it without talking about like literary criticism and shit, and I don't want to do that here because how boring. But I gave Jane Eyre no stars. I didn't give it a star rating because I read it, you know, as like a text for class, and so I don't know how I would rate it on a scale of like personal enjoyment. I think that I really loved and connected with the beginning of the story when Jane is really discussing like her life as a young girl and all of her like struggles and stuff. I felt like that aspect of the story was the most engaging and I felt the most for it. But after she got to Thornfield Hall and she started falling in love with Mr. Rochester's weird ass, it just you know, it took a dive for me. I didn't like it as much after she started falling in love with Mr. Rochester, because I think Mr. Rochester is weird as shit for multiple reasons, but we won't get into that. That's all I have to say on that. So for my Patreon buddy read pick this month, we read Cowboy to Remember by Rebecca Weatherspoon. Rebecca Weatherspoon is one of my favorite authors, so I was really, really excited about this book. And sadly, I didn't really love it. I mean, I didn't hate it by any means, but it's not a new favorite for me, which really did make me pretty sad. I gave it 3 stars. So Cowboy to Remember is about this character named Evie. She is a famous chef on like a reality show, and she ends up losing her memory. She has amnesia after a fall down some stairs, and after she takes this fall and she has amnesia, her publicist ends up calling some people that are part of her past to come take care of her while she's like trying to get her memory back. So she ends up reconnecting with her old childhood love, Zach, and Zach is a cowboy. He owns like a dude ranch, and they basically go back to his ranch and his home in California, and she is surrounded by all these people from her youth, and it's a really, really sweet like family story. There's a lot of really good like family moments, and like I said, she is a chef, and there's this really beautiful moment between her and Zach's grandmother where Zach's grandmother is like teaching her how to cook again, and it's really cute, it's really sweet. For me, this read kind of like a Hallmark movie if you're into that kind of thing, and the romance is between Zach and Evie, and I just kind of felt like Zach and Evie didn't have that much personal time together. It just felt like they didn't have enough time together for there to be the kind of emotional development that I would prefer in romances. So I didn't 100% love it, but it was like cute. I would say that as a family story, it was cute, but as a romance, it did not sell me. So then I read Flick with Friends by Shay Sanders. It's about these 2 characters. They're friends and co-workers, and they both get laid off at the same time, and so they end up deciding that a good way to make money would be to make a sex tape, and the girl wants to create like her own porn website and distribute it on her own, and it's basically about her trying to build up this like porn website and them filming the sex tape together and how that's going to impact their relationship. I thought that it was really fun, it was really sexy, and I thought that like the friendship and dynamic between them was really funny. So yeah, like it was enjoyable to me. I liked it. It's pretty self-explanatory, like it is what it is. They make the sex tape, they start liking each other, and that's the book. Only thing I didn't like about it, I thought that there was some like I don't know, like the conflict that arises in the story was a little bit like, I don't want to say it was rushed, but I think that the guy, like he started to get really annoying when it came time for the conflict to happen, and I started to like him less as the story went on because he was a little bit like pushy or something. I wasn't a huge fan of that. And also there was this really weird line in my opinion where the girl, it's like in the epilogue, and the girl's talking about like how she's pregnant and like woohoo, and she's like, yeah,
the night we conceived, my womb opened up for him, and
whatever floats your boat. It just was weird. It just was I don't know, it was weird to me. Anyways, moving on from that, that book is like the 4th book in a series, so I went back to read the 1st book in the series, which is called Take It, and ooh, child, I did not like this shit at all. I'm so sorry, but I hated it. So it's about this girl Sloane and this guy Keith, and Sloane, she works at this corporate office and she has a crush on her boss Keith, but she has this perception of him that he's really hot, but he's just like a dweeb, and she ends up working late one evening with him, and she finds out that he's really not a dweeb and he's just kind of putting on a little bit of a front, and it makes this discussion about like black people in corporate spaces and like code switching and all that kind of stuff, and like how to advance as a black person in a corporate space. And I felt like that aspect of the story was like really good. I really liked that. I really appreciated it a lot. And I feel like this story, where it really lost me, is that it makes multiple like jokes about the Me Too movement. Like the guy, he starts flirting with her and he's like, yeah, you know, I want to kind of make a pass at you, but I don't want to get Me Too'd. And it's just like, it's just weird and unfunny, and it's a joke that's made like multiple times and talked about and referenced a bunch of times, and it's just weird to me, like just weird as fuck. And then there's this other part, which the title of the book is based on, where the girl, she wants to have sex and the guy's like, you know, maybe we shouldn't for whatever reason, and he's like, you know, maybe we shouldn't, and then she's like, well, give it to me or I'm gonna take it. And I was just like, I don't know about all that, sis. Like that just seemed like not caring about consent, and I don't know, it just was weird. It put me off and I did not like it, so it was a no for me, dog. Then I read If I Never Met You by Vari McFarlane, and this was a buddy read with Noria from Noria Reads, Cindy from Read Cindy, and Chanel from Chanel Time. And yeah, this was buddy read with them, and it's always fun buddy reading with them. I love seeing their opinions on books and stuff. So anyways, we were buddy reading that together, and this book is about this girl named Lori, and she's been in this long-term committed relationship with her boyfriend Michael, and she really wants to move their relationship forward. You know, she kind of wants them to get married. She wants them to start having kids because she's getting older. One night she comes home from drinks with her friends, and Michael says that he's ready to call it quits, and she's like, what do you mean? And he's decided that he just no longer wants to be with her. He feels stifled in their relationship, and he wants to move on with his life. He doesn't want to have kids with her and all this other stuff. So he ends up breaking up their 18-year-long relationship, and Lori is understandably down in the dumps about this, just trying to reconcile with what has happened. And Michael comes to her again and reveals that he has gotten somebody else pregnant, and he's in another relationship, and it's only been 2 months since he broke up with her. So she comes up with this plan with her coworker Jamie for them to fake date, because did I not tell you, her and Michael are also coworkers. So she has to see his face every day at the office. So she comes up with this idea to fake date her, or her coworker Jamie comes up with this idea for them to start fake dating, and Jamie wants to fake date so he can show himself to be like a, I don't know, like a settled young man or whatever, so that he can become a partner at this law firm. And Lori just wants to, you know, show that she's also moving on. I liked this, but there was a lot of stuff about it that I kind of didn't like, or that I thought didn't make sense. So it was an interesting experience, because I listened to it on audiobook, and I feel like it was a really amusing audiobook to listen to. It was really funny, and I just love like British rom-coms. I think British humor is really fun. So it was like really funny, and I would definitely recommend listening to it on audiobook. So it was fun. It was really funny. I think that Lori and Jamie, they were cool. I liked their dynamic and everything like that. But to be honest, I didn't feel that much chemistry between them as a couple, so I wasn't like shipping them hardcore the whole book. I also felt a little bit like their plan just in general, it seemed really stupid as fuck, because they were also planning, you know, in their plan, they were planning to break up at a certain point. So to me, it didn't make sense, like what did Lori gain from it? Because she wanted to date him to kind of improve her reputation, so she wouldn't just be like that jilted lover. But then if she went through with this plan with Jamie, she would be the jilted lover twice, broken up with by 2 men in the office. So it didn't really make sense why she would be interested in going through with it. Also, Lori is black. Her mom is from Martinique, and I really felt like, I'm pretty sure that the author of this is not black. Based on her author photo, I'm going to make that assumption that she is not black. And I think that the way that she talked about race and racism in this was weird as fuck, and it was just not nuanced. It was not good. It felt very obvious to me that the author of this book was not black at all. And so I just felt a bit weird about that representation, and I would honestly prefer to read white authors writing white characters. I don't particularly care for white people's take on characters of color, because I very often read it and feel intensely uncomfortable, because it's just, they write it so fucking weird. Like Lori, the representation of her as a black woman was very weird in my opinion, and I was not a fan. But that's just me. I gave it like a 3-star, because while I did think that it was a really amusing story, I wasn't 100% sold on the romance, even though it was cute. And I did think that there was definitely some issues with the representation of Lori as a black woman. And the last book that I read was Just Like This by Cole McCade. This is an arc. This book comes out in November, so this is a ways away. But basically, this book is about these 2 teachers named Damon and Ryan, and they have this mutual student that has been kind of like cutting some classes, and they're worried about him, so they end up teaming up to kind of investigate and find out what's going on with this student, as they both work at a boarding school. So they're kind of like these students' guardians as well as teachers, so they're trying to figure out like what's going on with him and how they can help him. And along the way, they end up falling in love with each other, and this is kind of like an opposites attract, enemies to lovers kind of vibe, because Ryan is like an art teacher and Damien is a gym teacher, and they just kind of have like this bad opinion of each other, even though they barely know each other at the start. And so it's just like a lot of antagonism between them and everything like that. I ended up giving this also 3 stars. I think that Cole McCade is a really beautiful writer. He writes very beautiful prose, but I think that in this story, for me personally, the prose was beautiful almost to the point of distraction. Like, he really describes things almost overly descriptively. Like, the story was a bit overwrought in my opinion. There was no reason for some of the stuff to be described to such an extent that it wasn't, because I feel like the book really excelled in moments where it was trying to be more lighthearted and more funny. There were like some really sweet scenes between these characters and like their students, and I thought that those scenes were really fun and funny and, like, you know, energetic. I really liked them. But I felt like the beginning of the story was kind of hard to get into. Eventually it did bring me around, and I did think that it was cute, and I thought the epilogue of this story was really adorable, but I didn't 100% love it either. So it was just a month of me not really loving almost anything that I read, and it was really, really sad and disappointing to me. So yeah, please let me know in the comments, what books did you read this month that you really loved? Because I feel now that I'm kind of in like a reading slump, and I'm just not like feeling motivated to read. I'm not feeling invigorated by anything, and it just was like a very meh month, you know, just very middle of the road, and I don't love it. So yeah, please let me know what books you read this month that you really enjoyed. I would love to hear about it. Also, if you made it to the end of the video, please leave me a book stack emoji, I guess. Why not? So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all in my next video. Bye guys! And a special thank you to all of my wonderful patrons.